So just a bit about us before we kick off, about Raffingers. We're a firm of accountants. We're based primarily in Essex, so our main head office is in Essex. And we have also an office in London. Effectively, we're a top 100 chartered accountancy firm. We have 9 partners, and we range from different sectors in terms of our advisory that we do. We range all the way up from sole traders all the way to sort of multinational companies. So as a firm of accountants, we feel we're quite broad in terms of the services we provide and the clients we actually provide those to. And at the moment, I think it's probably actually out of date. We're probably about 80 employees. So we've grown considerably over the last 5 years or so. And where we see our strengths effectively, and I know I've mentioned to a few guys in the room, is gone are the days of us being a firm of accountants. We're actually a firm of business advisors. So what we're seeing now is, especially our charity clients, in one of our specialised sectors that we look after is charities, a lot of our clients are coming to us and we only spend, say, half hour discussing the accounts or the financials. We're actually spending more time sitting with our clients to discuss their strategy or looking at their plans for the next 5 years, and not necessarily just the numbers. So we've gone from being a firm of accountants to actually being a trusted advisor for our client all the time. In terms of a bit of an introduction about us, myself and Suda. Suda's a partner and I'm an associate partner at Raffingers. Effectively, we're both qualified accountants and we look after a number of clients in our own portfolios. Suda specialises in charities. I'm the data protection officer for Raffingers, so I've been looking after the GDPR transition that we've had over the last 18 to 24 months for Raffingers. And we both have our own portfolio of clients where we look after all their personal tax to limited company accounts all the way to corporation tax, and also looking at the strategy of the business in terms of exit strategies and inheritance tax planning. So we cover, again, between us a wide range of skills basically for our clients. I'm now going to pass it over to Tim, who's going to do his bit and probably be more of the expert to take you through some of the bits today.
Well, good morning to you all, and thanks for taking the time to come and see us. I'm going to flip this on because that's, well, let's get the right one. That's me. That's the authentication over. You can see that's me. Here I am standing up. Had this been a different sort of event, maybe I'd have put one about me 20 years younger. I don't know, but this is really just to get a bit of background and authentication. Why am I up here talking? I work for an organisation called Blue Saffron. We are a managed service provider. We've been in business since 2004. True to say, probably when we first started, like most organisations, we try to get business from anywhere. But actually, we now look after 3 main sectors. And we do that with organisations probably between 20 and 500 people. Generally in the Greater London area, but we also have some international clients. And our difference is, our differentiator, to want to put a sort of marketing phrase, is that we actually work as a true partner. Now I know a lot of managed service providers suggest that, but I think some of the stories and some of the things that I'll share with you in the next sort of 30 minutes or so will show the rationale behind that and the value to that. And picking up on what was just said about Raffingers not just being about accounts and doing the accounts and working as a partner, actually to get the most out of your IT, actually to meet the challenges that you have to these days, without acting as a true partner and understanding where your organisation's going, what its strategy is, etc., we'd probably fail to deliver them the things that you need and give you some value for money. So, a bit about us, say Blue Saffron, in business in 2004, and 3 main sectors which I'll come on to. But what I'd like to talk about in the brief time that I've got with you is look at the 3rd sector themes, the things that resonate with the 3rd sector in terms of IT challenges. And obviously, because this is about cybersecurity, we'll look at the cybersecurity support that's available. Where do the risks come from? And I want to look at that from 2 perspectives, probably from a technical, but I'm not going to get into the bytes and bits. I'm also going to look at the process and the people around that to give you some ideas to be able to take away and make some changes and make some improvements. So we'll look at some ideas to consider and actually look at solutions that are available that you probably actually have within your own organisations now, and how you could better use those to actually make yourself more secure and deal with some of the challenges. And then there's ending up with an offer that I always make, is that we're there to help. We don't cost much until the meter starts running to talk to me and get some advice there's only two things that I'm looking for. It is time and a nice cup of coffee. And then we can share some ideas and see where we go from there. So, we've worked with the third sector. It's one of three sectors that we look after. The other are professional services and recruitment. Why have we honed that down? It's because actually to be really of service to those three sectors, we need to understand them thoroughly. And we couldn't understand lots and lots of sectors thoroughly. So we really investigate and work and have found out what it is we need to know about the organisations we work with. And I'm sharing this with you because over the last 3 to 4 years, we've invested a lot of time and energy in researching the sector. This is with some of our own customers. We have something like about 30 odd not-for-profit organisations. That's quite a wide expanse, but let's keep them as not-for-profit that we work with. And so we went out and spoke to them. We spoke to the CEOs and senior leaders, but we also worked last year with Haymarket in the Third Sector magazine, and we did an extensive survey looking at the things that resonated with senior leaders. And we spoke to 300 either senior leaders, CEOs, COOs, Chief Technical Operating Officers, etc., whatever title you like, but they were all had a significant input into the strategy for their organisations. And these were the topics they came out with interest. Now, I'm not sure how many here we've got from third sector or how many with a side interest, but for those directly in not-for-profit, into charities, do they resonate? Are those the things that keep you awake at night? Recruitment, remote working, digital fundraising, are these the sort of things that resonate? So, we're looking today particularly at cyber security. We'd probably touch a little bit on GDPR because actually data protection is generally part and parcel of the IT remit and cyber security, but it's wider than that. But I'm also going to extend that to look at people because actually the two go hand in hand, and we'll look at how that happens. So, what's out there to help support? Well, I was looking around and there's probably two main documents that I found that I'd like to share. You may be familiar with these. One is cyber security. It's a document here which we'll look at in a moment, and the other is information from the ICO. So again, a question to the audience, those that have been involved in cyber security for your organisations. Are you familiar with these documents?
I think that if the truth be known, the silence is probably born out of more of not having been aware of these things. Many may have been, like me, may have been boring enough to read some of it.
Yeah.
But it's the processes around that. And everyone likes to think that we've got the right things in place, or relatively. But have we got it in place sufficiently with the sort of threats that come about these days?
Sorry, I missed your name. Gordon. Sorry, Gordon. Thank you. You've probably saved me about 20 minutes of a presentation here because what you've actually said is absolutely right as far as I can see from these documents. I'm going to share these Cyber Essentials. It's essentially an auditing process, and if you read this document, what it gives you is instruction here in some ideas where to look. And these are well intended, but use a firewall to secure your internet connections. Choose the most secure settings for your devices and software. Control who has access to these data and services. These are great and commendable things to suggest, but actually, how do you do it? How would you do it? How many of you in the room have perhaps got the people internally with the skills actually to challenge some of these? So picking up on Gordon's point there, we think we've got that in place, but actually how good is it? There's some other places to look. So I was going to ask somebody from question, but that's great, Gordon, thanks. But is there any questions that you'd like to mention about those statements? Or any statements you'd like to make about those statements? Because actually, they're great information, but actually what does it mean to us as people when we're trying to put things right? These are the ones from the ISO document that that I mentioned. And again, assessing threats and risks to your business. Well, we all try and probably have a risk register and assess as best we can, but actually how thorough is that? To what depth should we go? Secure configuration. If you're not an IT person, what would that mean? What does it reflect? Would somebody like to hazard a guess of what secure configuration means? What it means in your particular environments? Deathly hush. What does that mean in terms of your organisation? What have you had to do to be able to get secure configuration?
That's what I'm going to talk about later on.
Yeah.
Go through.
Well, no, okay, I don't want to steal your thunder, but you get the picture.
Yeah.
These are just high-level statements. So, what can we do about it? Where do the risks come from? So it's normal to think that we'll invest a lot of time, effort and energy, and most of those documents, other than the people bit, start looking at the external factors. And what do we mean by external factors? These are the things that we read about in the newspapers generally, about the email scams, about the phishing scams. We were just listening to a conversation earlier on about people sending emails in to try and fiddle expenses from, and they've come from outside and all these sort of things. These are external threats, and you can put a lot of effort and energy into the most secure environment that you can have or could afford to have to try and protect from the big outside world. But actually, what we need to consider is internal, because these are areas that you can do stuff about. So if we've invested heavily in here, and this is a tough one, because if you've ever spoken to anybody in the world where they're selling the software and the support, the sort of antivirus software, the people like McAfee and the like, Sophos, Avast, etc., they'll tell you that actually they've got groups of engineers working in sort of tight little rooms, dark rooms, never allowed to see the light of day, actually trying to keep one step behind the pack they're chasing, because these things are coming out on a daily basis, the fresh challenges, and all they can do is try and keep up. And so when you're spending quite a bit of money on this software that you're investing in, actually what you're buying, what you're sharing is the cost of a lot of investment that you don't see, where people are trying to keep up with the viruses, etc. But actually what you can affect is some of the internal stuff. So, where does the internal stuff come from? Well, there's obviously things like malicious intent. This is typically where you've got a disgruntled employer, or employee rather, that is hell-bent on causing some sort of destruction. And it's quite interesting, this is particularly just changed recently, and this is why I think we should pay attention. How many of you are aware of the change in an appeal that's recently gone with Morrison's? Just to give you a bit of background of this, about 4 or 5 years ago there was a guy, quite a senior position working in Morrison's, who decided to download, steal and distribute 100,000 people's details of his co-workers in Morrison's. Now this was stuff like their name, address, telephone numbers, bank account details. And what the intention was, not sure, probably to earn a few quid. Whether he sold that data on or was actually manipulating it himself, I'm not sure. Didn't say in the article. But the guy got his comeuppance, 5 years in prison. Absolutely brilliant, done and dusted. Justice served, you'd think. But actually no, because you've got 100,000 disgruntled employees there that took a case against Morrison's, their employees, because saying that actually you should have been protecting this more. Now, why this is significant is that despite lots of challenges, etc., a short time ago, the Supreme Court of Appeal came in favour, and it's, I've got to get the technical term right, so this is vicarious liability. Does anyone know what that means? So I didn't up until I actually looked into this. You're nodding your head. Do you want to share that with us?
It means that you're responsible for the actions of others. So, for instance, if you've got a driver who you know likes a drink, but he's working for you, then you should take action. You shouldn't let him drive drunk again.
That's a far better description than I've got, because I like the idea of a drink and protecting people that you're driving. So, absolutely right. So the employer has a responsibility. So actually now, despite, I'm sure Morrison's have taken all the precautions they needed to secure data, perhaps, that they felt, but despite that, they're now culpable and responsible for this going wrong. And coming back to the external and indeed the internal challenge, you can put whatever you like in place, but if someone's hell-bent on doing some damage, they're likely to do that. But you're still culpable as trustees, as senior leaders, as executives of your organisations. You will still be responsible for this. So, malicious intent. What about ignorance, though? So ignorance can be just somebody doing something a little bit stupid. And I use this one as an example. I'm not sure, any sort of football fans recognise this? If you cast your mind back June, in the middle of a heat wave, England doing quite well at the football, and good old Steve Holland was out on the training pitch, and one journalist managed to capture who England's team were going to be. That's just an example of the guy didn't mean any intent there, but actually it was not particularly good etiquette or policy to be able to wave these things about. Now these mistakes happen, and you'd think that from that they'd take stock of that and put some policies or procedures in to make it not happen again, wouldn't you? Well, look at this. Don't know if you remember 2 years prior to that, probably June 2016, we just got beat, or were just about to get beat by Iceland in the Euros. And good old Ray Lewington down there, same firm, just different personnel, same problem. Let the England team sheet out. So actually, what lessons have someone like the FA learned? So they might have had all the processes and procedures in place, but what they haven't done is teach or train and put policies and procedures in there that were constant. It's just an example. So these threats can come from malicious intent or ignorance. But either way, as the responsible adult in the room, if you like, you'll be culpable. So what can we do to actually support and put in place things to help this? I'm going to put this into 3 categories. ITSM, you familiar with the things? IT service management. If I said ITIL, IT information library, these are standards of process and procedure. So the gentleman down here, Gordon maybe, okay, we've got the headlines. Actually, how do you operate this? So what we're looking at in here is building security. So there's lots of things on the marketplace, there's lots of tools and techniques, but we're building this around a process and policy and procedures. So as a minimum, CMDB, who knows what that stands for? Ronnie, you know what that stands for.
Sadly, I do, yeah.
Configure management database. It is a database of not just assets and lists of assets, but it's actually a whole configuration of your IT infrastructure. Without that, how on earth can you start controlling this stuff? Because the way to protect some of this stuff is by knowing what equipment you've got on there, whether it's up to date, whether it's been patched. One of the biggest case studies you'll hear about data loss was the NHS in the last few years. And they had absolutely stacks of stuff in terms of firewalls and the like. But guess what? They're working on technology that wasn't even supported by Microsoft, who were the manufacturers or producers of the stuff. They were no longer protecting it. So they're working on out-of-date stuff. Underneath that are service level agreements that relate to those CMD, that configuration. So what are the times that you need to be doing the patching? How can we make sure that patching and the updates are getting done regularly? What about getting rid of stuff and changing stuff? We've got old stock, we need to bring new stuff in. How are we disposing of that? Wouldn't it be foolish if you just managed to get somebody to get rid of the stuff and all your data is still sitting on it and somebody picks that up? That's happened. So security management is all about process, procedures, been able to do this without even thinking about it automatically in the background. So a lesson to take perhaps would be to investigate what policies and processes and procedures that you operate to support your infrastructure, and how do they measure up against known standards such as ITSM, ITIL, ISO 20001, or even the full-blown ISO 27001 for security. Education, massive part here, because education, you need to educate both your team and your wider stakeholders, and that's an absolutely major challenge for charities. I know, because we deal with them, because you've not just got employees, you've also got volunteers. You've got people that are volunteering maybe for an hour or two every couple of months to some that are more regular, and you've got to keep them on board and find a way of being able to make sure that they're complying and doing the things that you're asking them to. And how do you educate people? Do you follow some traditional methods of just getting them in a room, giving them some information and saying, right, now you're trained? Or do you actually embed it and get a proper culture change and follow? Are you familiar with the 70-20-10 method of education, of development? It's part of adult education. 10% is the education, it's the information. Giving people the information appropriately at a time when they're going to use it and need it. The 20% is actually getting them to apply it. So actually making sure that it fit for purpose. And then the 70% is actually getting them not only just to understand it and apply it, but so it becomes the norm. So it's embedded as part of their psyche. It's what they do on a day-to-day basis. It's part of, if you've ever studied adult education, it's part and parcel of that. But it's making it about best practice rather than compliance. It's making it so that this is second nature to people rather than they're doing it because they think they have to. And then how do you communicate that? Well, use technology. I'm going to share with you in a moment some technology that you probably all have that you could readily use to be able to get this stuff out there and underpinned and readily available. So communicating this isn't just a one-off thing. It's a regular drip feed, and it's also making that information available at the time and point when somebody needs it. So if suddenly somebody is working from home for the first time, they know they can go online and download from a portal, from a knowledge base, information of what they should be following at that point in time when they need it. Now that, just thinking about it, puts a hell of a lot of strain and challenges on your current IT. How many of you are actually able to honestly put hand in heart and say that you could not just put the education bit together, but actually then embed it and communicate it? So, I can guarantee most of you are using Office 365 or have access to it. Is that a reasonable statement? But how many actually use it to its full extent, or are we just using it as an extension of the applications? So like the Word and the Excel and the PowerPoint stuff. Maybe you've put your emails on there, so you've gone to online exchange, etc. But this stuff for third sector, for charities, is so heavily discounted, it's unbelievable. If our commercial clients are paying sort of like 10, 11 quid a licence, when what's it down to, Ronnie, about 3, 4 quid, something like that? It's absolutely peanuts for what this can do. And underlying all of this, you'll see the application layout there. You've got Outlook, SharePoint, things like Yammer, Teams, etc. Microsoft 365 now is a universal platform. And underlying that, so you've got your stuff over here, your group stuff, but actually over there you've got all your security and compliance stuff, and I'll share some of that with you in a moment. But in the middle, Microsoft Graph, if you've ever seen, so this is business intelligence at the flick of a switch. And you're sitting on this probably and not using it. So where we find our first intervention with our clients normally is going in and just saying, look, you've already got this. Are you using it properly? How else could you use it? What are your challenges? What might you be able to use? Just take 1 or 2 bits of this and see if it works for you, and just try it out. Because the sort of things under there, just some snapshots. So you've got Yammer. Well, Yammer's now built in there. This is ways you can communicate and share stuff. This, and you know, don't tell me that people, oh, we don't like to use technology, because everybody I know is using this every day of the week. One of the things that somebody said to me when I went into a charity a few months ago, they said, you know what, it's coming into work, it's like going back in time. He said, when I'm at home, I can use my phone to be able to check my gas bill and electric bill. I can book a holiday online. Somebody pings the doorbell and I'm at work, I can see who's there, all seeing the adverts. And yet when I walk into my office, I'm actually using stuff that we were using 20 years ago. So it isn't the fact that we as individuals don't know how to use this technology, it's just that we're not being made available at work to take advantage of it. So all of these things are built in now. We've all been using, I guess, Skype for yonks, haven't we? So why aren't we taking advantage of these and actually doing some of our communication and education and just recording bits and putting stuff on as videos, for example, where we've perhaps given training things using Skype. All of these are things sitting in your organisation, but the thing that I really love about this is this bottom line here, and I'll try and, what that looks like is that underlying all of this are things like identity management, are things like control of your applications and your data. This is all sitting in there, part and parcel of that platform. So where you've got Morrison's now getting heavily, not fined, but having to pay money out to their disgruntled employees because they thought that they were actually doing as best they could, but actually they weren't. By using something like this, they could have seen somebody was downloading some stuff, or they'd seen an anomaly. You know, it isn't usual that someone would take down 100,000 odd names out of a database. You can secure against that stuff just in the background. So there's no excuse really. Some of the devices and the management of this. If people, who here's trying to implement bring your own device, for example. So bring in your own device, BYOD, something, you know, it's a useful thing. People are working from home, trying to do the good for the cause, using their own devices. How do we secure stuff? This stuff automatically will allow you to use that, but as soon as you leave the organisation, or we'll just pull that stuff off, so you're securing your data. This is all automated now. It's all sitting within something like M365, Microsoft 365. And sort of underlying that, within that, is what you can either, with your own IT team, or outsource, please, because that's how we make a living. But you can start looking at how you manage this, so you can control the users and the profiles, etc. We can look at the devices, all of the devices, whether they be laptops, hard desktops, phones, iPads, whatever. All of those can be controlled within this. And then all the apps and the software that's sitting on there, make sure it's up to date and it's been patched and it's secure, etc. So I'm going to wrap up now, because I understand that it's between me and you getting another cup of coffee. But the sort of things that we can recommend as an organisation is take advantage of your third sector discounts. This is where you can really start to make a difference to your organisation by getting to use those discounts and then learn how to use the technology. And if you feel inclined, give me a cup of coffee and maybe even a biscuit, and we'll show you how you can use this stuff better. Thanks for your time.